Elidor by Garner. 7. Corporation Property. "We couldn't have looked after them as they were," said Roland. The children became aware of voices shouting. Several men had come out of a corner shop in the street on the edge of the wasteland and were running toward the church, but no one moved. It seemed to have nothing to do with them. I'll have yous this time." The men were white with fear. The first one to arrive grabbed Nicholas by the back of his collar and swung him round. "Was there any of yous in there?" he shouted. "Let go," said Nicholas. "You'll answer me. Was there any of yous in there?" "Right, old Paddy, that's enough," said the biggest of the men. He wore a leather belt covered with regimental badges and appeared to be the foreman. "Now then," he said, speaking to the children, I want a straight answer. Was there any of you in there when she dropped?" "No," said Nicholas. The foreman sagged with relief, and the colour rose in his face. Now he could afford to be angry. "I've given you kids round here warning time and again," he said, "but you'll not learn, will you? You'll not be satisfied till one of yous is killed. Well, it's going to stop. Your parents can't manage you seemingly, so we'll see what the police can do." "We've never been here," said Nicholas. "Now then," said the foreman, "we want none of your lip." "Here, governor," said the Irishman, holding Nicholas. "Do you not think a good thumping might be better?" "No, Pad, you can't go on treating kids soft. Round here they think kindness is weakness, and something's got to be done. You know how it'd be first time one of them was hurt, don't you? Gross negligence on the firm's part, that's what. Insufficient precautions and the like, and no mention of all we have to contend with, no mention of malicious damage, endanger and safety of staff, damage to tools and the plant, theft, eh, Jack? Just have a look round while we're at it." "Right," said a boy wearing a tartan cap, jeans and mud-covered pointed shoes. He started to check the tools. "No, it's all here. Wait on, someone's pinched me football." "Well," said the foreman. I'm sorry," said Roland. It's in there." "Indeed," said the foreman. I kicked it through the window, and we went in to fetch it." "$6 it cost," said Jack. "We haven't any money on us," said David, "but we'll send you a postal order." "Oh, aye, an example. That's what's going to be made of you," said the foreman. "An example, I suppose. You know nothing about the lead that went missing from the roof last night, do you?" "Of course not," said Nicholas. "Of course not, aye. Well, we'll see, shan't we? Now, drop those bits of scrap you've got in your hands and come along. It's the police station for you. Keep fast to that biggest, Pad. He'll be the ringleader." "There's no need," said Nicholas. "We'll go with you. It's only a mistake." "It is that," said the foreman. "Now drop that stuff." "No," said Roland. "You what?" "We've not stolen them. They're ours." "Now look, I'm not here to argue," said the foreman. "Put those things back where you found them." "They're not yours," said Roland. "Unlawful possession of corporate property," said the foreman, "as well as trespass and willful damage. It's not funny to me, lad." There were 5 men and Jack. They were strong but heavily built. Jack was the only one who looked capable of any speed. "Remember what happened to the apple branch?" Roland said to Nicholas. Yes," said Nicholas. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Right," said Roland, and he swung the length of the railing up against the Irishman's elbow, down and sideways across Jack's shins, and ran. Through the din that broke out behind him, he could hear both the clump of Wellingtons and much lighter footsteps, but soon the Wellingtons faded. "Keep going," shouted Helen. "We're all here, and the treasures." The children stopped when they reached the first of the streets. Only 3 of the men had made any effort to catch them, but they had given up and were now going back to join the foreman, who was waving his arms at the Irishman and Jack. "I hope they're all right," said Roland, "but there wasn't anything to do, was there? I mean, we couldn't tell them, could we?" "If you've any sense," said Nicholas, "you won't tell anybody, ever, unless you want locking up." Do you think they really will fetch the police?" said Helen. "I doubt it," said Nicholas. "Not now they've lost us, but let's be moving, just in case." It was dark when the children reached Oldham Road, and rushing crowds filled the pavement. "It's lucky we went this way," shouted Helen, and vanished behind a wedge of men all wearing bowler hats. She reappeared, her cup held at chin height to avoid being smashed. David and Roland had less trouble with their lathes and railing. apart from a few angry grunts from people who came too near. But Nicholas was struggling with his keystone, shifting it from one hip to the other, and he was gray about the mouth. The pressure of the crowd eased as they came to the station forecourt. "There's a train in 10 minutes, said Helen. The crowd split at the barriers. Nicholas wobbled on one leg, balancing the stone on his knee, while he felt in his pocket for the tickets. Here, David said. "Here, David," he said, "you take them." David handed the tickets to the ticket collector, who was so busy with his punch that he never looked up until he noticed David. "What's all this here?" he said. "There are tickets," said David. "Aye, happen they are. But don't think you're fit to travel on a train in that state, do you?" The children looked at themselves. They were all coated with slime from the forest of Mondrum, and on that were laid plaster, soot and brick dust from the church. "We'll stand," said David. "You will not," said the ticket conductor. "But we've paid." A restless queue was building up. People were muttering, stamping, looking at watches. "Clear off," said the ticket collector, "and take your junk with you. I don't know how you've the cheek to try it on. There's a copper by the bookstall. Must I give him a shout? I thought not. Go on, off with you." The children slipped out of the queue and round the corner from the policeman. "What do we do now?" said Helen. Move along to platform 11, said Roland. "We can cross onto our platform over the bridge from the far end." "But no one will let us through," said Helen. "No one will see us," said Roland. "It's the platform where parcel vans go. There's an entrance from them next to the barrier." "We'll still be seen." "They're too busy to be watching all that closely. Next time one of those trolleys comes along pulling mailbags, walk beside it. And keep your heads down. And then, once we're through, nip over into the crowd." "There," said Roland a few minutes later. "It was easy." "You've some nerve," said Nicholas. "Where's it come from all of a sudden?" "You were pretty glad of it this afternoon," said David. "Have you thought what'll be said at home?" "Gosh, no," said Nicholas. "That's serious, isn't it? I tell you what, you and I'll go wash in one lavatory on the train, and Helen and Roland in the other. There are always two in the last coach." "Okay, but we'll only have about 10 minutes. When the train arrived, the children jumped into the rear coach and locked themselves in the lavatories. "There's no plug for the wash basin," said Helen. "Screw up a paper towel and shove it in," said Roland. There was very little soap. Helen and Roland washed themselves frantically, using the towels to scrape away the mud. But although the paper was harsh to the skin, it had no strength. It rolled into shreds, covering everything with pellets of sogginess. The electric train picked up speed, and the children were thrown about between the narrow walls. They collided with each other and the wash basin, which slopped water over them at every jolt. There was hardly room to share the mirror, and they were quickly knee-deep in wet paper towels. In the 10 minutes, all they managed was to accentuate their wildness. The few patches of skin threw into contrast the mud and plaster. The children inspected each other under the lamp at the bottom of the station approach. Their house was only 50 yards up the road. "We've made things worse," said David. "We need about 6 baths each." "Do you think we could all sneak into the bathroom without being nabbed?" said Roland. "We'll try," said Nicholas. "But there's going to be a row anyway. We can't hide our clothes." "Let's hope the key's not been taken out of the shed yet," said David. A spare key to the house was always kept on a ledge above the door inside the coal shed. It was still there. The children crept round to the sitting room and listened. "The TV's on," said David. "One of Dad's westerns." "Good, plenty of noise." "After me," said Nicholas, "and I'll murder anyone who coughs." They slid the key into the lock and waited until there was the cover of gunfire before opening the door. A damp, carbolic air met them in the hall. Nicholas felt for the light switch and eased it on. The hall floor and stairs were carpeted with newspapers. All the furniture was gone, and the shade from the light. Nicholas closed the door and led the way. They were just on the stairs when they heard their mother call, "Is that you, Nick?" "It was the switch," said David. "It always makes the picture jump." "Keep moving," said Nicholas, then louder, "Yes, we're back." But it was hopeless. The sitting room door opened, and there stood Mrs. Watson, and behind her 1,000 redskins bit the dust. And that is the end of chapter 7.